Hello everyone, amateur meteorologist. First in weather here, it is August 5th, 2020, and we now have post-tropical cyclone Isaias. You can see its tropical storm wind field is actually still pretty impressive here, about a 100 mile or about 70 mile wind field extension, and it's really maintained its strength in part, or slower, more slowly decayed, in part due to that very strong jet stream we had here that picked the system up and really gave it an extra boost in strength, which really allowed it to really not just get crumpled up like some other systems do as soon as they make landfall. And that's the reason we had some really impressive wind gusts in cities like New York, Philadelphia, even DC, where we had some pretty good wind gusts. In fact, I think New York had wind gusts close to 50, 60 miles per hour, which really did impact and cause some tree damage. We have power outages throughout New Jersey where they really had some very significant wind gusts up to 80 miles per hour in spots, and even 100 miles per hour just offshore. So very impressive winds with the system, not to mention the rain that many areas received. And right now it does have maximum sustained winds of 40 miles per hour. So it is definitely weaker. It's making its slow northeasterly direction before it's just going to collapse into remnants and just get sucked up in the polar jet stream. So now if we look at the National Weather Service hazards map, we can see that finally, after a few days, we're completely clean on the eastern seaboard. If you recall, we had tropical storm warnings just lining up the entire eastern seaboard, which is really just crazy to have tropical storm warnings down from Florida all the way up into Maine. So not something you see every day. That's over. The system was actually very quick. It was moving at I think around 33 miles per hour northeastward by the time it reached DC. So very fast forward moving speed, and that's also what helped allow it to keep some of its strength and sustained wind potential. But at the same time, what that also did was it reduced the flooding risk that was expected and feared. In fact, the National Weather Service was really concerned, as well as other meteorologists, about the huge flooding potential all along I-95. But because of its fast speed, you did not really see too much in terms of excessive rainfall. We did see a lot of rain, as you can see from this map, but we didn't really see those 10-inch totals that was feared in isolated spots. We saw more 3 to 6 inches in general in a wide area, stretching all the way down from Jacksonville or just east of that, all the way north into upstate New York. The highest core of heavy precip was just east of DC up until Philadelphia, where some places had 6 inches of rain or even more. So that was the main area where you did have that, or where you did have that really intense precipitation. Outside of that narrow band, we had about 1 to 3 inches in most spots. So still pretty noticeable, pretty significant, but nothing really too bad. And the highest wind gusts were really concentrated on the eastern extent. So places like Virginia, North Carolina, they didn't really actually see that many strong wind gusts except on the immediate coastline. But as you headed further north into greater population zones, those areas really did get significantly affected. States like Connecticut, Massachusetts, New York, like I said a few days ago in my earlier videos, they really would have a high risk of seeing some really good winds, as they would be on the east side of that storm, and they really did get slammed. So the main areas that really had those really strong winds was basically along this eastern extent, all the way up basically east of this black line, where you really did have some significantly strong wind gusts. Now, one thing I do want to point out is now this is the GEFS Ensemble on 200 millibar velocity potential anomaly, and this basically just goes to show where there is lots of lift occurring in the atmosphere, where there's potential for systems or waves or invests to form. And as you can see, right now conditions are quite unfavorable over Africa and essentially the entire Atlantic Ocean. We have a huge area of just sinking air, of anonymously sinking air. And so this would indicate to me a lot of convergence, or excuse me, rather divergence, with air sinking down, limiting the potential for waves to form. And if you look even at the coast or African continent, you can see really not too much. The coastline is covered in red. And so what that indicates to me is that the potential for tropical waves to come off the African coast and potentially develop and harm the Caribbean or the United States or go out to sea is relatively low right now. So I think we're taking a short little break from the really active pattern we've been seeing. We do have one system here that's already been formed, but that should really not be any problem at all. But if we look at these deep oranges, that's a good sign for people who are concerned about more tropical systems forming. in the next couple of days. And if we go through time, this is August 7th. That red area really strengthens actually into pretty impressive dome of sinking air. So that would suggest to me a big ridge of high pressure right here, really limiting any sort of wave development over Africa and keeping things quite dry as well. And then after that, that continues. If you look at the African coast, again, still covered in those deep reds, really limiting any waves that do want to come off the coast. And then this is August 18th. Now I think things could be a little more favorable. That red area has sunk in a little bit. As soon as those waves come off, they enter a very favorable environment of rising air. But then after that, this red area has really sort of shrunken down, and we do have an expansive area of rising air. And again, while Africa is the principal place for those waves to come off of, once those deep reds really sort of simmer down around August 19th or even August 17th, I think this big area of rising air here will have the potential then to really invigorate any waves that do come off and allow them to really develop nicely and go out to sea, hit the United States, or go into the Caribbean region. So I think there is going to be a 10-day or so break in some really active tropical activity, so which is good news for many areas who are tired after seeing Isaisis and do want a break from this active pattern. Now, that is not to mention, though, one thing I have to say is that this season is looking very active. We're seeing La Nina conditions nearly, or not officially, but we're seeing below average water temperatures west of South America. We're also seeing very low very low ACE values, or rather very high ACE values. So lots of energy to expend, and so lots of potential for storms to form. For example, I think Colorado State University just released their latest forecast. They're predicting 24 named storms, which is double the average annual amount of named storms. And this, again, is looking to be a very, very active hurricane season. So just stay prepared for that. And lastly, I want to close off with the European Ensemble temperature anomalies forecast. We had actually a very anonymously strong trough over the eastern part of the nation that really actually helped to keep Isaisis keeping its strength as it headed up the eastern seaboard. And the trough is actually what played an instrumental role in keeping Isaisis, forgive me for pronouncing that wrong, I just cannot get the name right, but it's really what helped it make that more westerly turn and stay on land, because with that trough right here and that big ridge over here, that trough really kind of sucked in that system and allowed it to merge with that jet right here, which forced it to go on land. If that trough was not there, this high pressure would have been there, but Isaias would have essentially paralleled the coast and then just barely grazed the eastern seaboard. But with this big trough, it was forced to really go inland. But anyway, so if we go look at the European Ensemble forecast, we can see that very below average air zone of temperatures right here, highs in the 70s, even upper 60s in spots. Very unusual for this time of year to see a trough that's that amplified, especially in the lower 48. As we go through time, that trough sort of collapses. And then we see a return of widespread heat. There's good consensus in the models that after about August 8th or 10th, we're going to see a return to the heat dome and above average temperatures essentially nationwide, especially in the northern Great Lakes region. So again, I think summer is not over. We're going to see a lot more hot days. July was exceptionally hot for many areas. For example, Richmond, Virginia had its hottest July on record since late 1800s, basically since records began. So very impressive stuff. We had a huge amount of days with 90s, 25 days in a row with 90-degree temperatures. Very, very unusual. So this heat will be taking a 5-day break or so, especially in the Midwest. But after that, things should get back to normal, back to summer conditions for most areas. So that's it for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.